So the draw for the Champions League this season, the new league phase, the Swiss model as some people are calling it, is on later this week. So with that in mind, I wanted to take a look at what has changed for this season, my general thoughts on it, and just everything in between really. Just a one-stop shop for knowing what is going to go on with this new draw, because obviously there was a very different format for this season. It's been in the works for a long time now. It's not something that's been a surprise really. They have revised it a couple times, UEFA, on how it'll actually work, but let's see what we can actually expect here. So the big change really overall for the first stage of the Champions League proper is it's no longer a group stage, it is now a league phase. So instead of these 32 teams being split into 8 groups of 4, you will instead have 36 teams, and these will all be split into 4 different pots of 12 teams. Now, traditionally, the group stage of the Champions League takes place entirely within the first year of the actual competition. So for example, before, in the 2023-24 Champions League, the group stage took place entirely in 2023, whereas the knockout stages took place in 2024. That changes though now, because instead of there being 6 games that you play against 3 teams, home and away, you instead play 8 games in total, and each one of these 8 games are split up into 2 matches against different teams, either home or away from each pot. So you will play 2 teams from pot 1, pot 2, pot 3, pot 4, and that is regardless of which pot you are in, because if you're a pot 1 team, you'll still play twice against other pot 1 teams, for example. So, and it also stretches out into the new year as well. So in terms of points and everything like that, it's still the same: 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a loss. Once all of these 8 games have been played, then you get an overall league ranking. The top 8 of this league ranking automatically go through to the round of 16, and from there the Champions League is exactly the same as it was last season. That has not altered. What is different this time around is there are a few key differences. So for example, before, if you finished 3rd in your group, you would be demoted to the UEFA Europa League. However, this time this does not happen anymore. If you're out of the Champions League, you're out of Europe entirely. And I think this is actually quite a good thing. I mean, UEFA have come under a lot of fire for this new Champions League format, but spoiler alert guys, I think on the whole, it's actually better than what we had before. And that's one of the key reasons, because sometimes you get a lot of really top level Champions League teams. Like take Chelsea for example, in 2012-13, they dropped out of the Champions League, went into the Europa League and absolutely stormed it. It feels like a reward for failure almost, in a sense, you know? I mean, I know they were the European champions in the Champions League, and it was cool to see them hold both trophies for a very short period of time, but I don't know, I feel like it's punishing the Europa League teams unfairly for this as well. And this is all, by the way, the UEFA Europa League as well is in the same format as the Champions League too. So Europa League teams will not drop down to the Conference League either. The Conference League has a very similar format to this with the league phase. Instead of 8 games, it is 6 games, and I believe it'll take place entirely within the first year, so 2024. Though I've not looked at the specific format for that, but that's the overall outline. I just thought I'd give a mention to the other 2 as well. But yeah, where was it? So the teams from ranked 9th down to 24th in the new Champions League format, they will go into a new playoff round. So instead of there being like a round of 32 or something like that, like they're kind of going to do for the World Cup, there is a playoff round instead. So instead of getting a bye towards the round of 16, the remaining 8 places in the round of 16 will be determined by a playoff round. And just a standard home and away thing. I imagine the top 8 of those will play against the bottom 8 of those. So like 9th through 16th will play against 17th through 24th. And the team that is placed higher in the league will have the advantage of playing away first and then at home second. So yeah, that is kind of the overall format for the Champions League. There are some criticisms of this, and I understand it, just to go through the negatives of it. I mean, overall, I do think it's a positive thing, but the actual draw, I mean, you'll see it when it happens. I think it's on Thursday or Friday. We will see that a lot of teams will have a very unfair draw. We get that anyway, but I think the unfairness, the imbalance of the draw will be very much skewed compared to before. We'll see some massive variations. I mean, if you look at pot 4, for example, you've got teams like Sturm Graz and Bologna, but then you've also got teams like, well, Brest in there as well from France, but you've also got teams like Monaco, Aston Villa, Stuttgart, who did incredibly well in the Bundesliga last campaign. It's going to be a very imbalanced draw. And speaking of the draw itself as well, it's going to be computerized. Now, there is going to be some manual drawing. I think the first pot teams are going to be manually drawn, but to actually do it by hand, it would take around 5 hours, and they need like 90 pots or something like that because of how convoluted it is. That's one thing that's a disadvantage. I mean, to be honest, most people don't really watch the draw anyway. They just look at what's the actual draw is rather than actually watch the draw itself. But yeah, if they did it by hand, it would take around 5 hours. So yeah, I don't think many people will be watching that in its entirety. And imagine if they got it wrong and had to restart the whole thing, so well, they'd be there all day. So yeah. So overall, I think it's a good thing, but yeah, I feel like there'll be some accusations of the draw being rigged because it's done by computer. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are accusations of these draws being rigged anyway when they're by hand, things like heated balls and stuff like that. Trust me, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and I will not comment on them. I'm just saying they're there, but there will be more of them after this, no doubt, especially from the teams who have a very tough draw as well. But overall, I do think it's a good thing. But yeah, some people will be complaining about that, and also be complaining about having more matches as well, because if you go through to the playoff round, then you've got 2 extra group games plus 2 extra playoff games as well. And this is in an era where teams are constantly complaining about playing too many matches, but you'll have some teams playing 4 more games in the Champions League and all of them playing at least 2 more. So make of it what you will. Let me know your thoughts on the Swiss model, whether you think it's a good thing or a bad thing for the Champions League. I think overall it's a good thing, but it is far from perfect either. But is there a perfect solution? I'm not so sure. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and of course, for much more football content, keep it tuned right here to thefootballchronicle.com. Like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell as well for much more content just like this.